Ever since AI has been included in ON1 Photo RAW, I think we've kind of gotten to the point where we've just been using it so much. Today, we're not going to use any AI in our editing workflow. And I think that this is a great technique to use from time to time to really connect with your image and direct the viewer's attention to the places that you care the most without being bogged down with artificial intelligence masking tools. If that's something you're interested in, then stay tuned. If not, maybe this is not the video for you. Now, with that being said, I am getting over a cold, so my voice, it is a little all over the place. I beg your pardon on that, and hopefully you give me a little bit of grace. If you'd like to pick up ON1 Photo RAW 2026 and save a little bit of money, consider using the coupon code FREEWILL10. It does stack on top of any discounted prices that you may see on the website, and it's also good until the end of November 2025. It is an affiliate coupon, which means I make a little bit of money, but it's at no extra cost to you. It's a win-win for the both of us. And of course, if you want to follow along with today's lesson, then consider downloading the file out of the description box below. Now let's go ahead and jump into the computer and take a look at editing this image. Here we are inside of ON1 Photo RAW, and this is the image we're going to work with. Now, before we get like completely into the weeds of this editing technique, let's get rid of some of the things that are distracting. And for me, it's this power tower or whatever this is, and then this reflection of the power tower and this little ball. So I'm just going to come over here, and again, not using any AI, or I'm going to do my best not to use AI in this particular video. I'm going to go ahead and select this area right here and just paint it away with the perfect eraser, because I think that the perfect eraser does a good enough job on this type of stuff, right? And I'm not trying to make this the most perfect edited image ever. I just want to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'll fast forward through this, but just know that you can use the perfect eraser to paint away these items. What I will say, however, is get rid of the bigger items first and then start working with the smaller ones. And you could use the reduced power lines. Again, I don't want to use the AI, and that's the reason why I'm not doing it. So I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward to this, or until I get everything gone. All right, so I think I got everything out of the image that I don't really care to have there. I did get rid of the power tower that was in the trees here. You don't have to do that. I don't think that it was overly intrusive, but I just wanted to get rid of it for the sake of knowing that it's gone. And I don't think that this is a bad render, if you will, after getting rid of it. So let's go ahead and jump into the actual editing now. So I'm going to hit the letter Z as in zebra on my keyboard, and that just gives me my zoom tool. So that way I don't accidentally erase something that I didn't actually intend to erase. And the first thing that I want to do for this particular editing technique is I want to darken the overall image. All right. And so what I'm going to do is come over to the develop module, and then I'm going to come down to the exposure. I'm just going to pull that down. Usually one stop does the trick, and I think that this is going to be just fine. The reason I'm doing it is because we're going to paint the light back in gradually in the places where we want the light using the brush tool. So it's easier for me to darken the entire image down. Knowing that I brought the entire image down one stop allows me to increase the brush exposure to 1, maybe 1.5 if I want something to be a little bit brighter, and I get what I want to go for, and it'll make sense. So let's just go ahead and jump over to the local tab. And you could also, I should mention, with this particular editing technique, you could use the temperature slider to increase the temperature however you want that to be set. So maybe I'll pull up on the temperature just a little bit here. and then maybe even add some vibrance into the overall image. You could always come back and do this at the end, so it's not a requirement to do it initially before you start painting in your light. Okay, so we're going to come over to local. Now, of course, with the 2026 version of ON1, the masking tools do look a little bit different, but don't worry. Again, if you have an older version, all we're using is the basic brush tool, all right? And that's going to be your local adjustments. So what you'll do, I'm just going to minimize all of that stuff so it declutters this area for us over here. What I'm going to do is click on brush. And the very first thing I want to do is go ahead and pull up on my exposure about half a stop. All right. Now, the reason I want to be gradual when I paint in this light, because I don't want it to just overpower the image. I want to be able to control and sculpt where the light goes in the photo. And so you do this in small increments. All right. Another way of controlling the light and where it goes is to come up to your brush properties. To get there, what you'll do is come to the upper left corner of ON1. You'll click on the actual brush shape, which at this point should be round. And then in the pop-up window, your properties may actually be collapsed like so. But what you could do is just go ahead and uncollapse them or expand them, and you get access to feather, opacity, and flow. Now, you'll notice that my opacity and flow have already been reduced. Your opacity and flow may actually be at 100% like that. And as soon as you move your mouse off of this pop-up window, it will disappear. All right. Now, I'm not going to go over this any further in the video, so just take the time to understand what's happening here, and then we're just going to get into the technique. So what we want to do is bring down our opacity, and I like to bring mine down somewhere in the 30s. There's no exact number that it has to be. It just needs to be something that gives you the level of control that you're comfortable with repainting the light. And essentially, what this is saying is if I have 100% opacity, as soon as I start painting, then the exposure of 0.55, because that's what we have, that's going to go 100% into that area. And you may want that, but that's with one click. And then the next time that you click, you can't add any more. And so that's why I'm saying you're losing a little bit of control. But if you pull this down, even to 50%, then you're going to get half of that exposure compensation or adjustment for 0.55 added under your brush wherever you paint. And as long as you don't lift off of your mouse button, it's going to allow you to paint 50% across wherever you move your mouse. All right. So let me just show that to you in real time. I'm going to go ahead and paint right here. That's at 100%. And I'm just going to move this up to a +1 exposure. So if I turn this off, turn it back on, you can see that's at 100% opacity and 100% flow. If I come up here, and you can also change your opacity in the actual options toolbar here. If I come here and just change this down to 50%, and then I come and click right here and I paint, you can see it's not actually painting that much more. That's to be expected. I still have my finger on the left mouse button, right? And if you're using a Wacom tablet, as long as you continue with that stroke, it's going to allow you to paint only 50%. So if I move my mouse to the right, I'm now only painting 50% over here. Same thing to the left. And even if I paint back over the same area, I'm only painting 50%. I can't paint more than that. It doesn't allow me to until I lift up off of the mouse button. Here's my hands. And then I go ahead and I paint over this area again. Now I'm getting an additional buildup. Now, don't worry so much about the math and the numbers, because essentially what this is allowing me to do is to build it up over time. Now, if I press the letter O to show you the mask, you can see The gray area here is just, less of the adjustment happening at a time, all the way up until I build this up until it gets pure white. And you can see I'm still adding multiple times. So 50% really does give you a lot of flexibility. You may not need to go less than 50% when you are painting your opacity. I'm going to press the letter O to hide that overlay. And then we're just going to go ahead and reset this adjustment and reset the mask as well. So that way we're back to where we started. The next step is going to be the flow. Now, if opacity is your control over a single click as you paint, your flow is how much of the adjustment is loaded onto that brush at any given pass. The more you move it, the more it's going to build up. All right. And so essentially at 100% flow, the brush is as loaded as it possibly can be. Think of it as a fire hose. If I have the fire hose full blast open, everything is coming out when I paint all at once. I really have little control over how much goes where. However, if I want to build up the effect in a particular area, then I can just pull down on that nozzle and only a little bit of the flow will come out of the brush. So that's probably a better way of saying it. If you're familiar with this and you have a better way of explaining it, please leave it in the comment section below, because this is a community where we help each other out. So with that being said, those are the only two tools that you really need to know, because I'm going to leave the feather at 100%. And then the brush size, you're going to move the brush however big or however small you want. And that's based off of where you want to point or direct the light. Now, with that being said, you definitely want to vary the size of your brush while you're painting. And we'll talk through that here in a little bit. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with this adjustment. So I'm going to come back over to my actual adjustment, and I'm going to increase this to about 0.75. I think that'll be good. That gives us a little bit more. Again, we lowered this by -1 exposure. So what that means is I can now paint back about 1/7 of a stop, if that's even the way to say that. I don't know. Anyway, with a sorry, keep moving the mouse off of that. With an opacity set to 50%, which is where I think I'll start for today. You could go lower, but I don't want to make this video crazy long. And then I'm going to have my flow set somewhere in the 30s. I usually like to put it in the 20s, but again, I want to paint the effect in a little bit more aggressively over this video. All right. So all that out of the way, what do you want to do? Well, when you're painting in light, my recommendation is always to start with the areas that actually have light in it. So in this image, we have these trees. You can see that there's a bunch of shadow over here. So we'll come back to that, but we want to start with the trees, or at least with the areas that have light. So I'm going to start with these trees over here, and all I'm going to do is paint over them, make a easy pass, and I'll lift up, and then I'll paint in this one tree. It's like it has more intensified light on it. So I'll paint a little bit more, and I'm just clicking multiple times when I paint with that flow. And I'm resizing my brush to the size of the thing that I'm painting over. So this tree is a little bit larger than this tree. So that's why you see my brush size changing. And that's kind of my idea. And the goal here is I want to direct the light around the image, at least in the areas where the light is already hitting. All right. And so I'm just going to go ahead and follow this little stream of light that's going up these trees here and kind of connect that there. And then maybe come over the top of these again. And this area is a little bit brighter, so I'll make my brush size a little bit smaller and just paint in on that area. Same thing over here. this area can get a little bit brighter. And what it does is it starts to separate very naturally without making this look over processed. Starts to naturally start to separate the brightest areas from the least bright areas, or the lesser bright areas. So now we'll go ahead and work in this little tree zone right here. So I'm just going to work on, there's like a little V of light that's coming down here. And, these are the areas where I think they're interesting, at least as the light was crossing over this image, right? Or this scene. Now, this area is much larger, so I'm going to increase my brush size and just kind of paint over this area here and enhance the light again. And I'm making it smaller because I'm starting to focus more on this grass area, and I could probably line out the lake a little bit more by coming across the edges here. And you can see now I'm starting to give more shape to the overall image. Let me show you where we've gotten so far in just, a couple of those paints. So let's go ahead and turn this off, turn it back on. It looks extremely natural, doesn't look like I over processed it. And that's actually the mark of a seasoned editor when working with an image. And this really lends itself well to landscapes, but you could use this technique on any form of photography. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and maybe brighten this up just a hair. And the beauty of having that brush set so low with the opacity and the flow, if I press the letter O, you can see this is getting less of the effect than this area where I kind of spent time building that up. And then coming across the lake edge, also building that up. So it just works out really well. Now I'm going to come over here to the right and start painting this part over here. And I'm using a smaller brush again because the area that I'm painting is actually really small. And this is the entire technique. This is all you really have to do when it comes to using this particular technique. And then of course the reflections, I want to get those. Now, where this technique really comes in handy, and I'm only painting a little bit in the reflection because the reflection is darker than the actual trees that are getting hit by the light. So I don't want to make the reflection too much brighter, but I definitely want to make sure that I give it a little bit of attention down there. So if I turn this off, turn it back on, and this is what, some people would call it dodging, which in some cases it probably is actually dodging. But for me, I like to call it directing the light. All right. Now, the next step for me is to start working with the shadowed areas. Now, because I know that I pulled down on the exposure by 1, I could probably come in, and I'd also do this on a new brush, by the way. And then we'll add a new brush, and then I'm going to bring this up probably about 1.1, somewhere in there. We could always change it later. All right. That's the beauty of working inside of ON1 with this technique. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paint over this area to bring a little bit of interest to it, but I don't want it to get extremely bright. Like, I don't want to open up the shadows. I just want to bring some of the detail back. Very, very minor. All right. And that is, again, like, I want this to look like something that you would see with your natural eye. And so that's the reason why I'm doing it this way. And I'll just brighten up this foreground element here just a bit. And doesn't have to be perfect. And maybe I'll do something like this, where I'm actually going to bring in more information on the right side here, just because I have this pocket of light that is really interesting overall. And then I'll just open up some of these shadows that are back here. And I really do enjoy this like mysterious shadowed line here, but I'm going to paint over it just a little bit to kind of bring it out overall. So if I turn this off and turn it on, you can see it's, again, very subtle. That's the key to this entire technique, is to be as subtle as you possibly can with this particular technique. All right. So those are the two adjustments for painting with light. Now, once you have your light painted in the areas where you would expect it to be, now it's time to go and start working with the colors. And you could do this with a brush tool, or what I'm going to do is just come over to the effects, and I am going to use a tool that I think they put it in the 2025 version of ON1, but if you don't have that, then you can just use the color enhancer, which is in all versions of ON1, or at least the most recent ones. But I'm going to go with the color editor, and then I'm going to grab my little eye picker tool. Now, if you've never used a color editor, this is a way of selecting a very specific color and then being able to modify just that color, and you get a little bit more control over the range of what that color represents. So for me, I want to come over here to these oranges and just click there. And I think that that's selected pretty decent. Now, if you need to see what ON1 is actually selecting with that color, you can click these little glasses over here on the right side, and it'll make the image black and white. And anywhere that you see color, that means ON1 has made a selection. We can see it's just getting that fall foliage, which I think that is going to look good with us modifying. And this is for like those really finite changes. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and pull the colors more towards orange, and then maybe saturate them a bit more. And that's just going to help, again, bring out that fall look in this scene. So if I turn it off, turn it on, it is very subtle, and that's okay. All right. We can even push it just a little bit further, I think, and it'll still come out just fine. Now, if you don't have access to the color editor because maybe you're working on an older version, then you can use the color enhancer, and the fall preset will do a very similar thing. And then maybe you'll want to back that off just a little bit, so that way it's not like overpowering the image. Both do a very similar task, and I think that they both look good. And then, of course, you can always combine them if you have both, or if you have access to both tools, right? So I think I'll leave it with that particular look. But what I really want to do is apply a split tone. I don't do that often in my edits, but today I'm really feeling that this would do well with a split tone, because we have the blues and the oranges, which are complementary colors. So I really want to play off of that. So let's just go ahead and hit add filter, and we'll come over here to creative and grab the split tone filter. And so in my highlights, I think I want to go more with that orange look. So let's just go ahead and in fact, I think I'm going to sample a color from the image. So let's just grab the eye picker tool, and we'll come over here. That may be too dark. Let's go with maybe one of these. Yeah. So we'll go with that color in the highlight. And then I'm going to crank the amount slider quite a bit. And then for the shadows, we'll do the same thing, and we'll grab a blue out of the reflection in the water. And we'll increase that. And let's figure out a good balance. And maybe we need to brighten this up a bit. and maybe shift the color to a more warm tone, maybe something like that. And then we'll just go ahead and pull down on the split tone and then pull it up ever so slightly. And that's just going to start shifting that split. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I don't know. Maybe I don't like the split tone, or maybe I need a darker blue. Yeah, probably just a darker blue in the shadows works better. And then I can just pull that down a little bit there. And so here's the before coming straight out of camera, and then here's the after. Now, if for any reason you feel that the image is still like too dark, not filling the frame the way that you want, well, that's where you can come back to your develop and you can just push the exposure a little bit more. Maybe I'll open up the shadows a touch and I could play with the midtones, but everything is going to be proportionate to the way that that light painting has worked. So think of this as like your global adjustments to fine tune the overall look. And maybe I'll saturate the image a little bit more and give it some vibrance, you know, just to really bring out the colors and the interest in the overall image. And this image could probably also use some contrast because I do like my images to have some contrast. So here is the before, and here is after all of the final edits. I think that this looks good. You let me know what your thoughts are about painting with light in the comment section below. If this is something that you think would be helpful for your own workflow, or if you have a different technique of using the brushes to paint in certain areas of, you know, adjustments into your image. I'd love to hear that down in the comment section below. Now, if you want to pick up the latest version of ON1 Photo RAW, consider using the coupon code FREEWILL10. It stacks on top of any discounted prices that you may see through the month of November. It is an affiliate coupon, so that means I make a small commission from everyone who uses it, but it's at no extra cost to you. It's actually a win-win for the both of us. If you got questions about ON1 or this technique, let me know in the comment section below. If you want to learn how to use ON1, consider signing up for a training call with me. A link for that can be found in the description box. Until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.